Hello and welcome along to the Crystal Conversation. Tonight we have a really special opportunity to spend some time with the amazing Michael Eastwood, who is the founder of AristA's, the present chair of the ACHO. And tonight our focus is going to be around the Crystal Oversoul's work, wherein we're going to look at a couple of cards during the conversation set against the background of the mandorla, which is also going to be coming in as a container for what we're speaking about. So welcome, Michael.
Oh, hello, Lynn. It's such a lovely way to connect with you and to share my work and to enhance yours and Ruby's wonderful work. I often sort of pop in and listen to some of the interviews and watch some of the YouTube films, and what you two are doing is wonderfully elevating. And what I find amazing is, when we put these things out there, we have no idea really how far they're going to go and who they're going to touch. And I find that remarkable, wonderful.
Mm. Well, I know you shared recently the remarkability of realizing how far your work had touched, Michael, with the Crystal Oversouls. And it is it's phenomenal, I would imagine, because I know just with our little podcast, we can see where it's being picked up from around the planet. So
yeah.
I'm sure more so for yourself. And it's a beautiful vibration to be raising around the planet, really.
Well, what I find remarkable about my Oversoul work is that it nearly never came into fruition because I was working on it. And I know we've spoken about this before, but it's when recently I did that social media post, Instagram post, about how staggered I was when I got my royalty statement. It never ceases to amaze me, the interest in my work. And I think one of the things is because of that point where I nearly threw it all away, I was so frustrated with it when I was working on it. And I'm really fortunate to be married to an editor. And that feels really God-given in a way, because his work would have never seen the light of day without him. And him editing. So it went through 3 edits, and by the 3rd edit, I was tearing my hair out. And I just thought it would never happen, but it did. And so my work always feels, when it reaches audiences, it just feels remarkable, because it was that close to being thrown in the bin. And I was so frustrated, and I was so despaired at the process, but yes, we got there eventually. So and obviously these cards and this edition of the cards is selling phenomenally well, and it's just really exciting. And it just the Oversoul's always told me at the beginning, especially when I was going through the edit, and I would often tune into them and ask them, or sometimes they would just talk whether asked or not, and I received this guidance from them, that just how far they would go, and I mean how far the work would spread. But again, it would my work seems to go to certain people, and it's not that they're only meant for like elite people or anything like that, but they tend to certain people attune to them and get them. So I'm always amazed when I get sort of fan mail And of course, fan mail is different to the way it used to be. It's not letters anymore, it's emails or DMs on Instagram or Messenger. But still, there's still fan mail from all parts of the world. And I'm just always really touched. So one of the subjects when we made contact about this interview, I wanted to talk about two of the cards especially tonight. The Isis Quartz, card number 50, and magnetite and pyrite, card number 66. Because this is the sort of thing I wanted to do last year and the year before, but of course COVID disturbed everything in terms of making appearances or running workshops or events. So all this work I was going to do has been completely disrupted. And so tonight feels like I want to introduce something that I'd wanted to introduce earlier in last year. I was planning to do this on the spring equinox, and then I had to wait, of course. So for those who are unfamiliar with the actual Isis Quartz card, it's card number 50. And this is, for those unfamiliar with an Isis Quartz, this is a blade of light, which is a very special quartz that comes from Colombia, a very, very small mine. And I know the gentleman who mines them as well. And I've seen, I'm not claustrophobic, but when I see his pictures of him in the mine, and two other people with red eyes because they're so deep in the ground, and these holes about that wide, it just makes me feel ill. The idea of going down these tunnels, and I'm always like, well, what happens if you get stuck? You know, and anyway, mind boggles. So these blades of light are extra special, I find, because I know the people. And so it adds another dimension to the quartz. But this particular one is an Isis quartz, and it's because of the 5 parts of the apex there. This has a little time link on the side, but the main part is the Isis quartz. Now, Isis Quartz is a name that was really coined by Katrina Raphael, not by myself or anything. And I'm in utter admiration of Katrina Raphael's work. And the woman herself, I worked with her many years ago, and she introduced me to Isis Quartz. So I felt when I came to do the Isis Quartz writing and attunement, I felt at the time that how can I top what Katrina Raphael has written about this really powerful stone or configuration for our time. So first of all, I didn't want to touch it because I'm in awe of her work, but obviously I did. And I didn't want to repeat what she had said, but I wanted to build upon what she had said and honor her work as well, which is what I'm hoping I've done. So the Isis Quartz for myself has always played a very big role in my own personal life. And I'm really interested in this idea of fragmentation and our soul's fragmentation. So on one level, of course, we're all one and we're in complete unity and harmony.
In the field,
and yes, and yet when the soul work I've explored myself since my late teens has, and I'm not saying this is the absolute truth, this is just my truth. I've been very curious about my own imagery I've received, that the way I understand it about fragmentation is that although we come into being, into incarnation, there are fragments of our being that remain discarnate for whatever reason. That can sometimes be trauma, and that can sometimes be that the time is not right for that part to come through. and be a part of our incarnation.
Yeah.
So it remains hidden, it remains unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
What the oversouls sort of imparted upon me, and hopefully this comes from my work, is that at the time we're in this incarnation, for many of us who are drawn to this particular work, we are here on purpose, and we are here as part of a collective to navigate and nurture and bring into being a new age. And part of that is we will require different parts of our fragments to come and assist us at that, as we need them. Now, a very personal story of mine, which I think maybe illustrates the whole process of fragmentation, is my own coming out, which was in my sort of late teens, early, about 21, 22. And I had this experience where when I met my first boyfriend at the time, when the next morning, should we say, without going into details, the next morning I woke with this sense of that I knew I was gay before. I knew since I was a child, but that part of me sort of stayed away, if you like, stayed absent. But the next morning when I woke up with my first experience, I woke up, the first thing I realized was a part of me had come in.
Yes.
Though I'd come out, I'd come in. A part of my being had given permission, if you like, to come through. And I woke up with this sense of completeness. And I woke up with this sense of like a whole half of my being had become visible, had come through. So that's my own personal experience. And at the time I was working with Isis Quartz. I'd been introduced to Isis Quartz by Katrina Raphael. And so Isis Quartz and this process of fragmentation, which Isis symbolizes the collecting of the fragments, putting the fragments together. And for me, that journey is an ongoing journey. It's not that we put that and then that's it, we're complete. That we're so vast, our being is so multi-dimensional that we require different parts to come in at different times, make us more and more complete. And for me, sometimes we can't force that process. That parts of our being can only come in when the environment is safe for that to come in, which of course leads us on to what we could call soul retrieval. That in the process of soul retrieval, the different fragments of our being that remained discarnate or absent, hidden, will only come through, will only become conscious when the space is saved, when the environment is safe. So for me, Isis Quartz has always, and I think always will, play a big part of my own journey, and I think for many other people as well, that we are on this journey of parts of our being coming in and supporting us. And we can use that process consciously. We could say, well, I'd like to master, some subject. I don't necessarily mean a language or anything like that, but a particular skill. So somebody might feel that they're not very competent with money, for example, and one can work with Isis Quartz and say, okay, well, on some level, I'm competent. On some level, in some previous life, I've known how to do that. And I would like to invite that part of my consciousness in that knows how to master money, for example, just as an example. Because sometimes people say to me, well, how do you work with crystals? Do you have to do anything in particular? Do you have to, meditate with them, mask them? And you can do those things as well.
Yeah, you can.
But in my experience, working with powerful stones, I don't necessarily undertake any rituals with them, and there's nothing against doing rituals if, if you're drawn to that. But my process with powerful stones is being with them, having them around me. That's just how it works for me. It might not work the same for other people.
Yeah,
Do
it's
you
like
find it's not?
the everydayness of being with them almost works through the different levels of our being, doesn't it? And
Yeah.
I think those different levels are involved in the process you're describing, the reintegration of fragmented aspects of ourselves. And I love what you're saying, because it's almost like you're saying in companionship with the ally, you can almost give a permission to discover the sacred mystery of yourself, because of course this is all linked with sacred mystery teachings, I guess, isn't it? And what the Isis story actually represents for humanity, really, and individually.
Yeah, absolutely. And the process for me, we're working with the Isis Quartz card and the mandala. People might find that just having the card around is enough to trigger off one's being, to recall and to bring in. And I find the process our being doesn't bring in that which is uncomfortable for us, or that which is not necessary. It brings in that which is necessary, that which is important for us to bring in that particular time. And I feel for myself that the Isis Quartz works very on a very multi-dimensional level, in the sense of sometimes I'm aware when something has come through, and I haven't necessarily even asked for it, and that I'm really curious about. And I sometimes imagine it a bit like parts of our brain waking up as well, that when we're working with these fragments, there's like a spherical sort of energy to it, and the different parts just sort of spark awake and illuminate us in terms of how to master something, how to.
I love what you're saying there. It reminds me of the notion of a deeper soul, I suppose, and it reminds me of the notion that time is not linear. And maybe for me, as you're speaking, it conjures up that impression of when you're with the Isis, you're not in linear time, you're kind of like in a completion, almost very close to I don't know if you could say this, but like a 0 point, a kind of a completion point at which the things that we might not even ask about drop in, because it's bigger than us. The querient is bigger than us at any given point.
Absolutely. Well, that sort of leads on to the other subject I want to talk about, which is mandorlas. And when I was working on the magnetite and pyrite card number 66, and that's a piece of magnetite and pyrite.
Beautiful.
When I was working upon that stone, I received the word mandorla, and I thought it was like a brain spelling mistake. I'd never heard of them before. It was absolutely new to me. And I wrote it down and thought, oh, I've made a mistake there. Anyway, I'm fortunate to be married not only to an editor, but an artist as well. So we have hundreds of art books in the house. And I started to look through some books with Christian iconography, and lo and behold, there were these mandorlas. And although I'd seen them before in the books, I'd not quite registered what they were. And for those who are unfamiliar with mandorlas, they are essentially an almond shape. And they're often depicted in Christian iconography around Jesus and Mary. And according to the research I've looked into, they only started appearing about the 5th century. Doesn't mean they didn't exist before then, but there's no record of them. And nobody quite knows why they suddenly appeared in the 5th century. But they're also in Tantric and Buddhist iconography as well. So they're not unique to Christianity. So that may, I'm not saying it is, it may have been that that trading people, early medieval trading people, came across the iconography in India, for example, and it started to filter back through into Christian iconography. That's just my own theory. Because there is evidence that humans have been trading and moving around and were far more intelligent traders and crafters than anyone previously gave them credit for. So for me, mandorlas, the almond shape has obviously significance of looking like a vulva, a divine feminine image. And often it is created through 2 overlapping circles. And it's the space where, as the 2 circles overlap, it's the space in between. And that is essentially the mandorla. And that's when often if you look at mandorlas, you will see 2 circles overlapping and then this almond vulva shape. And often the figure will be, within that shape. Now, I find it interesting also that almond shape is, of course, the human eye as well. And of course, that again, nearly everything always leads us back to Egypt. And of course, the eye being a really important symbol, obviously turned round the other way, is of course a really interesting symbol in Egyptian iconography, in terms of the all-seeing and sometimes all wrathful eye or all loving eye. The eye in Egyptian symbolism has quite a few aspects. It's not just one. And I was sort of reminded of when I was in, I think I was maybe 17 or 18, and I was had this idea, which of course is absolutely common now, of making a circle of crystals. To me at the time, it was my own, it was absolutely original, and I didn't know where it came from. Anyway, I made this circle and I sat there. And I'd never consciously meditated at that point, but I sat in the circle, and it just felt the right thing to do, and just simple quartz points. And I'd read some. Do you remember those early Forson's books in the late 80s and 90s, like the Forson's Guide? Forson's don't even exist, but there were some Forson's guides, and I had the Forson's Guide to Meditation, and I read through it, and I thought I'd try some of the exercise. So I sat there and closed my eyes, and I thought, I'm not quite sure what to do, but still, I closed my eyes, and the first thing that happened was this enormous eye came out of nowhere right towards me. Close. And it wasn't a human eye. It was just an eye I'd never seen before, but I knew it was an eye, and it terrified me. I just stopped straight away and put the. I sort of stood away from the circle and just thought, what was that? What on earth was that? And I didn't go back. I dismantled the circle and stopped and put the book away. And I thought, okay, I need to process that. I didn't know what it was at all. And it wasn't weeks later, I didn't do the circle this time. I just sat there and I was a bit like, okay, does this only happen when I do it in this process, or will it happen when I close my eyes to go to sleep? And it never happened under any circumstances until I meditated. So I learned after a while that the eye returned, and I learned. I thought the obvious thing was to go into it and to see where it would lead me. And so when I was working on mandorlas, though in iconography the almond is always upright like that, I am really interested in keeping it that way, but also turning it sideways. And when you and lovely Ruby are attending the crystal retreat this September, and what I'm feeling we're going to be doing is working with that symbolism in terms of the two mandorlas, the overlapping mandorlas, because for me that mandorla is, I mean, all mandalas are also, all mandalas are portals, but mandorlas are, for me, a sort of unexplored portal, and I'm really really wanted to be working with them last year. Obviously, because of COVID, I couldn't. So I had to just sit on it, and I'm not very good at things like that, because I was like, when I feel the energy of something, I want to do it, and I want to run the energy when it's there. And I was like, no, I can't wait a year. And then, of course, it's been nearly 2 years. By the time we do the retreat, it will be 2 years. And if you told me before that I'd have to wait 2 years with an idea, I would have thought, no, I can't do it.
It's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. No,
but I can. And so this is what we're going to be exploring on the retreat in September. Is I'm exploring it in the sense of, I like to explore these subjects with groups, without having too much of an idea of what's going to happen, because I find it exciting myself to create that space, to hold that space, and then see what unfolds with who's there with that group.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you're speaking about when you feel excited holding on to it for 2 years. I mean, I'm just so excited by what you're saying. I just want to jump in. I've managed a minute. I've managed just that minute, because obviously what you're speaking of taps me right back into the work that we've done because I have worked with the 2 cards that you mentioned and the concept of the mandorla. And I was so wowed in that working, because what you're speaking of is that space in between the two, it's described as opposites or maybe differences, but it's coming to that middle ground in between, isn't it? And I know with the work that I'm remembering times when we entered into a huge space that you would have set up with the crystals, and we physically stepped into that space and worked in the organic, spontaneous gathering of a group of people to go into that, the eye, if you like, of the mandorla, and we did it through dance and movement and instrumentation and sound. And yes, that's, as you're speaking, all of that's coming back, because in that eye of the mandorla, it's a whole creative way for us to experience ourselves in relation to other people also, which is what your work brings us inside of, really.
I love working. I mean, you've seen my work in terms of creating really large groups of people and creating these portals of dancing and singing and drumming and all sorts of noises we make, and getting sweaty and really moving into these spaces and inviting that space to reveal itself, to welcome us in, to draw us in. So I'm really excited to be working for the first time with mandalas on the retreat. And as I say, I've just when we had to cancel last year's one, I was like, no, I can't wait. I can't. And I've got this. I do struggle when I feel that inspirational energy come through. I have to remind myself that energy, of course, knows no time and space. It doesn't matter. but I do. And I struggle to contain it. So it's been really interesting to contain this energy for nearly 2 years, which is what it will be in September. But contain it I have, and I'm curious that of what will unfold with that, because I find that space in between is it's the inter I wrote some notes earlier, so it symbolizes the interactions and interdependence of opposing worlds and forces. So how we have these two, for me it's I come back again and again to this idea of old earth and new earth, and this overlapping, which I feel we're in at the moment, where we are, and of course we've all been tested to our limits in the last year and a half, and we are in this overlap of old earth and new earth. And I do believe in our lifetime that overlap just becomes wider and wider. And that is at times we're able to be in that space in between, when we are able to navigate the old earth and the new earth simultaneously and hold those forces within us. And then, of course, sometimes we can have events or situations in life which drag us back onto the old earth. We might feel a bit heavier or sluggish, or it's a bit the world is more challenging. And then other times when we're really on completely in the new earth. For me, the old earth and the new earth are I'm not quite sure how that's going to be physically in the long run, but I've definitely experienced in my lifetime this, and in the last 20 years, this acceleration of the challenge of having a leg in both, if you like, and trying to live well with those forces. And of course we're all have the same initiation in a way of how to live with the emerging vibrations of the new earth, and whatever that may mean for us personally and collectively in our part in that. And yet the old earth is still very much at large and around. And of course we've seen that in the last year or so, where we've all been, much as we may not have liked it, we've all been restricted. I mean, we're not literally in our physical movements and where we can go, what we can do, even who we can touch. And that, of course, for me anyway, and I think for a lot of people, that has felt alien to, it's felt unnatural to be apart from people, to be unable to touch people, for example. And yet we've come through it, where we're not, obviously collectively we're not out of the woods yet, but we are. There seems to be light at the tunnel at the moment, and I feel that I think a lot of us are going to be realizing over this next year and into next year just how much we learned during that lockdown period as well, that we were forced to. I think for a lot of spiritual beings, we don't like to be trapped. We're free spirits, and we like to feel that we can. We worked hard for our freedom and to be who we are. We've worked hard to be. To have the freedoms to say and behave and do it as we feel right for us, and we've worked hard to come out of situations where people have wanted to inhibit us or diminish us in some way. So the last year, I think, has been really hard because it's like, it's like, we've got government and, all these impositions on top of us, and how this feels absolutely, we worked really hard and suddenly it feels like this big no, we're not going to let you go. and I think the next year, a lot of us are going to be exploring just how we got through that.
And what you're speaking of, Michael, I'm linking it with what you opened speaking about tonight, which is the Isis Quartz. Because when you're saying about the retrieving of parts of oneself, and having gone through this journey we've gone through this year, we are in a position where we can recognize what has been missing, what's been lost. And in coming into the new earth, do you think that the regathering of what has been lost for ourselves is part of this journey of the new earth? When we say we don't quite know how it's going to look, the new earth, we don't know how it's going to sit side by side with the old earth. Is this very loss that we've been through this year, and then this regathering, do you think it's all part of where it could lead?
And I do believe that for example, when we meet in our crystal retreat in September, I think the momentum for us to stay true to not have our faith in each other shaken, going, no, we can get through this. And then when we do meet, our momentum is even stronger than before, because we've earned the right to be there. We've earned the right to gather and to celebrate each other. And I think that energy will be even higher because we're still there. It didn't diminish us in any way. If anything, I feel for myself that what I really gained from the different lockdowns and the isolation is, and I think for a lot of people, the sense of things were quieter, the air was quieter, the cleaner. I mean, it was full of birds, so it wasn't full of aeroplanes, for example. And I think maybe the new earth was this. As speaking as a gardener, I noticed the quality of air and light and sunlight was different, and it may be that glimpses of the new earth will come through in that, the quality of. And then, of course, our challenge is like, how can we, when things go back to normal, how can we maintain that quality? And I think a lot of people discovered qualities that they'd not known were there. And so I think we will gain a great deal from this. And I think lots of people will make quite big life changes. For example, I think you would see a great movement out into the country, for example, and because people realizing that they can work more from home than they realized they could before, and companies realize that people can work, they don't need to be cooped up in offices, they can work from home. So I think there will be a lot that will come from this, and I feel that the collective Isis energy has, although we were restricted, we've also gain something. I'm not quite sure what it is yet, but I'm feeling we're on the cusp of discovering that we've actually, something else has come in that space, something else has been birthed in that quiet, in that space that we collectively created.
Well, I know when I was working with the Isis Quartz and then looking at the mandorla work that we were going to cover, I could sense that continuum of the Isis gathering, and certainly the way that I connected in with it through the cards. It was a very nurturing, nurturing energy. And because you include scents and perfumes, it took it to another sensorial, like a bridging sense. And
Well, I was
because
going to say, just
yeah,
while I remember, that was an additional information that went into the edition of the card, because I've always been into scent, and the positive attribute that when we work with crystals and scent, then and we have a positive experience or magnified experience, when we then rescent, where we smell that scent another time, it's a positive experience. And I do feel that scent can transport us backwards and forwards in time positively. And of course, it can have negative implications as well. But my work is about obviously enhancing and recreating positive experiences. Like the first, myself and Maris went to Jerusalem many years ago, and I've always loved the smell of frankincense. But to smell it in Jerusalem, in the churches and the temples, was just that it took it to another level, and it triggered off a lot in me. So the way I work with perfume and scent in the cards was to introduce this idea that how can we ground these experiences even deeper into our psyche, into our brain as well, by using the positive attributes of scent. So that every time we smell that smell, part of our being is transported into that dimensional awareness.
Yes, and when you speak about the new earth, I suppose that capacity for entrainment feels like it will be aspected in the new earth. It will be how we will experience it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All these different aspects of entrainment.
Yeah.
And I loved it because I followed through with what we were going to speak about this evening, doing the Isis and finding out more about the mandorlas, and then coming to the cards. Is it card 56 with the pyrite and the
66
with the pyrite and magnet? Because in that meditation, it was as if it had all come together. The scent, I think you've mentioned in that, is the almond perfume.
Almond, yeah.
And I was thinking, gosh, this is a whole, almost a rebirthing opportunity that you could entrain yourself within if you dwelt with just these two cards. Really, it was phenomenal. I was like, wow. And today I'll be mostly rebirthing, so it was absolutely phenomenal, and I'm laughing about it, but it's also very subtle, but something in you knows it's happening. Incredible. Yeah. So for you, the mandorla particularly linked into that second card that we're going to be talking about this evening. So is there anything that you could bring to share with that?
I find with the magnetite and pyrite, what I found fascinating was I'd never come across two oversouls working together before. They all seem to be on their own, like rose quartz, amethyst, and so forth. So I found that a bit of a struggle, first of all, because I thought I'd mix something up. But I found it really interesting with magnetite and pyrite that they were the only ones that I encountered where they, a bit like those two circles overlapping. So it took me quite a while to quite comprehend their imagery. And it was in the overlapping of their energies that I saw the almond and the mandorla. That was the first time I had encountered it consciously. Obviously, once I saw it everywhere, and I thought, oh God, I've been seeing the symbol for years, but I've not connected it. So those energies of magnetite and pyrite, of course, are quite strong, earthy. There's a quite magnetic and powerful metallic energy about them. And I felt it fitting that the Oversoul cards ended on those cards, on those energies. And it feels to me that with my work, I always like to ground things. I always like to bring things into matter, and for the work to be tangible. So it feels really interesting with the magnetite and pyrite that they are very earthy stones. They're not. I mean, earth can be inspiring as much as all the others as well, but there's something about their metallic energy which encourages us to be incarnate, you know, to take our space in the world and actually be visible, because their energy and the Isis Quartz energy seems to be very, very much about our visibility and our being present. And that doesn't necessarily mean that our visibility is about being world famous for what we're doing, but actually visible in terms of being seen for who we are. And it feels that this, of course, when I wrote my work, I had no idea that COVID was on the horizon and that, we'd all be locked up for months on end in the year, and now it feels even more important that that we take our place within the world, that whatever that place may be, and that we become visible. We become even more visible, and even more who we're meant to be, who we are. So for me, that comes out in my work, of course, in my through my crystal work, through my oversoul work, through my retreats, and it always feels with the retreats for me that it's probably within a year, it's the time when the volume is most turned up on my being, if you like. And I think that's what I missed most about last year, because I couldn't. It's a performance in a way. It has this performative quality to it, which I think those who attend enjoy that quality as well. How often do we get to dance around with drums and sing and get sweaty and make crystal circle? How often do we get to do that? And see each other as well, because for me, part of the work is, when we're in these large circles and somebody is invited to stand in the center and you've got 30 people around them drumming and singing and celebrating them. And often when I stand there and I think, how often do we get a chance to do this? And of course we didn't have a chance last year to do that. And yet that would have been a wonderful time to do it, because we all really needed
we could have really done with it. we could. Yeah. I mean, I love the magnetite and pyrite, the card, and I'm just thinking, because when I was reading about the magnetic and the magnet, to me that spoke of the bigger net. And I guess that's, and at that point you were introducing, as you said, the two stones together as an oversoul, and therefore bringing in the whole mandorla consideration, really. And when you speak about getting together at the retreats, it's as if we've become a giant net.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Something. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I really get that, because I really feel that when we reenact in these spaces, and we're all standing at different points, there are these webs of light which are joining us, which are merging with us, which are radiating out from us as well, and we are giving of that light and receiving of that light at the same time.
Yeah.
And I'm really curious with in September how how that will be. I'm really excited about doing it, and I still can't believe I've waited 2 years to do it, because
It's a long
so
time, Michael. It's
that's a
too
really
long.
challenge. It is too long. And also too long to not to have danced. There's we danced around in the kitchen, but it's not the same as a big group of us just being together. And
Can you say anything? Because I hadn't realised the connection with the mandorla and dance. Is it something that you're familiar with, Michael? Are you aware of the connection of people coming together and dancing the mandorla? You know, the sequence of it. I know that's how I've experienced it on the retreats, but had you made that association yourself?
It's interesting you said that. I've just presumed that's the way to do it. I've never, no, I've that sort of just happened. And on the first retreat, that just came into, before the first retreat, which this would be about the 7th year, I think, 6th or 7th year. Before the first retreat, I'd worked with smaller groups of, say, about 12. So I've done smaller versions. And it wasn't until the first retreat, there were obviously 30, I think the first retreat there was about 20 people. So an average of, say, 30 people. And I thought, oh, actually, I've always been interested in what it would be like to work with a larger group of that. And that's interesting. I hadn't consciously put those two together. I just knew there was a rightness about it. But now,
this is why I love your work, Michael, because it's so unfettered and organically spontaneous, and takes us down that natural, unfettered path to realize itself. And that's the beauty of it. And
it also triggers, when you said that suddenly triggered off an ancient memory of, I'd go as far back as Lemuria. I had this sudden vision of, I've often had, my entire life, I've sort of had these visions of light, and different things will trigger them off. And as you said that, I was suddenly really aware of the ancientness of gatherings and the ancientness of dancing and making sacred spaces and spaces that celebrate our togetherness. And for me, it's a bit like, again, the two overlapping circles. There's a need for some structure, and yet at the same time some wildness within that structure. There's an order and disorderliness all overlapping in the same moment, because if it's too structured and contained, the exuberance isn't there, the energy isn't there, and the energy comes from, you have this holding space, and then within that anything can happen, and that's I found that wonderful.
It's a beautiful way of working, and that's one of the ways that I really appreciated, being able to work in that way with your material, because I think the treasures can be found because they're not predicted or anticipated. They arise in the mystery to yourself. Really.
They do. They're new to me as they unfold in front of me, and it is deeply satisfying for me. And it's deeply satisfying to be working with people who can take that, hold that responsibility with me as well. That I'm not working with people who are sitting there, like, okay, you do all the work. That's not the same. For me, it's more, it's exhilarating to work with people who go, we're all a part of this. We're all play our part in bringing this alive. And that's what I find really, truly exhilarating, and puts a smile on my face, and a smile on my soul's face, I'm sure of it, because it feels soul satisfying.
It is, and I mean, there's so much more I would love to just go into, but I am sadly aware of the timing that might have to release you, but it does feel like you take us into the dance of the universe, even in the shapes of the mandalas. and the colors that you use, but you set a tactile tone, you set a color light influence, and you also set the shaping and the form. So all the mandalas that one can work with have a series of generally guardians or gatekeepers, and they're very significant numbers.
Yeah.
All of this matters, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And there's the bringing of all of that together. Has all this arisen out of just your experience of working with the oversouls? This is all. Yeah, because they're all very inclusive and yet very different. Each of the parts.
I hope to include everyone within it and allow that space for anyone who's invited, or anyone's invited to join within that space. For those who hear the call, will feel that call to participate within that. And I'm just happy that people are willing to trust me. Often when I stand there, I have a vague idea of what we're about to do, but I don't know the outcome. And an hour before, I can often think this might fall flat on its face. I don't know. It never has. So I don't have that feeling as much as I used to. But I still am really grateful that people are willing to trust in my visions, and there must be something about it which people don't need. They don't need any coercing. They don't need any beating into it. People just go, "Yep. What do we do? What do you want us to do?"
Yeah, it's because we can all be participatory within it, can't we? With an overall holding containment, we can participate. And there's something about owning that piece of participation, which I think is very much of the new earth. It's not about A leads to B.
No.
It's about the very experience of being within A, which you may stay in A, you might not have to move to B. Do you know what I mean? It's the
And it's for me, it's about creating the space and then trusting people to say you don't need to be told all the details. The energies of this will guide us, each of us, to our particular strengths. I know sometimes when I've done things before, and suddenly those who are really good at the geometry of all the lines, the engineers I call them, will appear. And I'm not even sure who they are in the group, but suddenly they're like, all these lines need to go, these are the angles, and I'm terrible at stuff like that. I can do it, but my lines end up a bit wonky, and or I tread on the crystals, and so forth. So, but the engineers go, they just appear and they go, we're really into angles and precision, so great. And then the others who like to, who are not into that, will collect flowers, for example, or crystals, or just hang about and enjoy the giggles and the laughter and the seriousness, and that's all part of it. And just letting, for me, the new earth is not about any one person or any one ideology or any one fixed thing. It's how can we be fluid and yet make things happen at the same time, and how can we allow the invisible to be our guide, and to live from that space of the invisible be. And that for me brings right back to the Isis card, which making what was invisible, making it visible. And for me, when I work on retreats, that's when it happens. That's when the invisible becomes visible, because it's there, it's right in front of us.
It's coming the full circle, isn't it? It's reconnecting to those parts, and they're not visible because they're not invisible at that point when you've come through, because you can sense it, you can hold it in your being, really. Which is the beauty of this. Now,
I know.
Before I let you go, could you please just, for the viewers and the listeners, just say, if you can, about how people could tap into your work further, Michael?
Yeah. So the people make contact with me from my website, which is www.aristia.co.uk, spelled ARISTIA. Instagram is probably where most people connect through my work, which is Michael_Eastwood_. And these days it's very easy to connect with me that way. The retreats tend to be full each year. There are 2 spaces left on this year's one.
Really?
So if anyone's interested, they just need to contact me ASAP, because we've got limited numbers on the accommodation and everything. Contact me that way. Yeah, because if they go to the website, there's a contact page, so they can always send me an email, and then I'm happy to answer anything. Or on Instagram, a DM. I get a lot of messages from people, and I always answer everything.
I know.
To the best I can. So.
Well, and more than, yes, I know. So coming to a close of what's been a fascinating process and experience into the Isis, the mandorlas, and the magnetite and pyrite, which kind of, for me anyway, came from the place of remembering and regathering with the Isis and moving through the Vesica Pisces, integrating diverse, as you say, difference, and coming through to the magnetite and pyrite, which anchors it in our physical being, which I think are all relevant opportunities and experience for anchoring the new earth, not as a distinct something different, but as something that we gradually accrue more and more over time, really. Yeah,
I think it's something that we've already been inhabiting for quite some time.
We've already been
inhabiting it for quite some time. Anyway, we'll save that for another time.
And on that note, just like to say thank you so much.
My absolute pleasure. I love talking to you.
I really appreciate where you take us to, and the permission that you give us to trust in the invisible becoming visible, and the containment that your work offers in that. Thank you.
Thank you.